Okay, so welcome back, everyone. We're going to now do a preview of the chapters we're going to cover in the new semester. So, in Introduction to Linguistics 2.0, we have four chapters. There are actually five more chapters in the textbook, but because of timing, we will cover four of them. And the four chapters are morphology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, and discourse, and language change.
Yes.
So let's start with the first chapter we're going to cover, chapter 5, morphology. What is morphology, Professor Yuan?
Okay, so actually morphology is, okay, and in this chapter we will start to look at the meaning. Remember earlier, okay, when we talk about phonetics and phonology, we only talk about sound.
Yes, we haven't
individual
introduced,
sounds.
right, we haven't talked about when you add sound, add meanings to those sounds in languages. So we're moving from the sound level to the word level, to the level of meaning.
Actually, okay, I would say that not quite, because before we talk about word, actually there's something smaller than a word. We call it a morpheme.
Yes, the basic concept is a morpheme, and we need to know what that is. What is a morpheme?
Yeah, actually morpheme is the smallest unit that carries meaning.
In language, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you consider cat. Cat is a word, but also a morpheme.
It is also a morpheme, yes.
Yeah, but there's something smaller than
a word,
a
yes.
word. So,
yeah.
Can you give one example, just quickly?
Okay, so for example,
what about S?
An S?
Yeah.
Yes, an S is a morpheme. Yes, it's a morpheme because if you add S, it changes the meaning. So the word cats, if you put cat and S, those are two morphemes because cat means something and the S means something else.
Yeah, and you all know it means plural.
Yes,
right?
plural in English, right?
Yeah.
So those are two morphemes and they form one word.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so there are two important kinds of morphology that we will talk about in detail. One of them is called derivational morphology.
Yeah, and then after that we will talk about inflectional, and you will learn it in class, in the following classes.
Yes, what does it mean to derive words? How do you inflect words to create new words? Those are what we're talking about in these two parts. And we will move on to talk about the interaction between morphology and phonology. So, for instance, the same plural S, right, is pronounced in different ways in the English language. And we'll talk about that in detail when we get there. The last thing is collocations. What are collocations? Very quickly.
Yeah, collocation means when you put a bunch of words together, but then you have to say it that way without any other way. For example, when you say 鞋袜 in English,
yes.
Yeah, and then in Chinese, but
yes.
then in English, how do you say it?
Shoes and socks and shoes.
Yeah, then exactly which one? So you get confused sometimes.
Right.
But then for native speakers of English, they will always say it just one
way, right?
In one way, yeah. And then so you cannot say it the other way around, right. And then you will learn it how to say it exactly. And actually, it's the so-called native speaker intuition.
Right.
And then there's no any rule to explain to tell you which should be put at the beginning and or what and what other word follows it.
Exactly. Okay. Yes. So for instance, salt and pepper.
Yeah.
You'll never hear a native speaker say pepper and salt.
Yeah.
And why not? Well, collocations, right?
Collocations.
That's the
reason. And then if you know it, you know it. If you don't, you simply don't.
You simply do not.
So you just have to memorize it as non-native speakers.
As they do. Okay, so that's morphology. How about syntax, chapter 6? What will we be doing in syntax?
Yeah. In syntax, okay, we know that we move from the word level, right, morpheme, and then word level, okay, to another level. We combine words together to form phrases, to form sentences, or even longer unit called discourse, okay? And here we begin to look at the rules, the so-called structure. Every sentence has its syntactic structure.
Syntactic rules. And in order to understand syntactic rules, we need to define the word classes. So these are words you're familiar with: nouns, verbs, adjectives. What word classes do certain words belong to, and how can they be used to form set utterances, how can they be used to form sentences that follow the rules?
Yeah, and then also at the level of phrase, okay, you know a phrase, and then we will talk about the head, okay, and what is a head in a phrase?
Yes.
Okay, you will learn that. Yeah, and then after that we talk about clauses, sentences, okay, yeah, and then also there are certain other terms we need to learn, like constituents. What does it mean? Okay?
Constituents, yes.
Yeah, right.
We'll also talk about syntactic relations
and processes.
And the syntactic processes. So the relations between different parts of speech.
Yes, okay. And in the next chapter, we will move on to semantics.
Yes, this is a very, very
discourse.
Interesting chapter.
Yeah,
yes.
Another chapter which I like.
Yes,
yeah.
Me too. So we will start by talking about thought because that's where language starts from, right? You need to have a thought that you want to express using language. So we will talk about the nature of thought.
And how we, map our, thoughts and then try to fit it into our language.
It's very interesting because actually it's easy to think that language and thought are the same thing, but that's not true. You can think in other ways. You can think in images. You can think in sound.
Right.
It's not always words, right?
So like you can express your ideas in a piece of painting, a piece of music, right?
Right. Yes. Or through dance, maybe.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be language. So how do we get from thought something we want to express? And get it to language. We'll explore how language maps meaning, right?
Yeah. And next one, okay, we'll talk about again, okay, the meaning of word, and then we move up to something longer, okay, yeah, like phrases, okay, and discourse. And here, okay, we will also talk about how we define a word. Okay, there are several different ways, okay, prototypical meanings, and then also we talk about sense, okay, and the reference.
And stereotypes, right. We'll also talk about in this chapter how we mark, right? How we make things marked in language.
Yeah, and what does it mean when you say something is marked and something is unmarked? What does it mean?
Well, for instance, in English, we mark things like tense. We also mark things like the plural, right? But not all languages do in the same way. And so these are some aspects that we will talk about, how they are marked in a language.
Yeah, and also something is marked actually is something which is unusual, which is not so common. But something is common, usual, and we don't mark it. Okay?
Yes.
So let's move on.
Yes, the last chapter we're going to talk about this semester is language change. There are many interesting things here in this chapter.
Yeah, I bet you have noticed that the language is constantly changing, and maybe it reflects more slowly, in writing than in speaking. And actually, changes can happen at all level. We see it in, some change in sound. Maybe some certain sounds, disappear, along with time. And
or
then,
some words are mispronounced and everybody mispronounces
and then
them.
it becomes convention. People
yes.
do it in the wrong way.
Right.
Okay.
And it becomes the right way.
Yeah,
if enough people do it. Yeah.
So like Aizen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And also it moves, and also we see the changes in like in word. Yeah, we have new word coined.
Yes, every day. For instance,
you give a good example.
Yes, just a few years ago, the word selfie is used in a new way, right? The invention of Facebook gave us a new way of using the word to like, right?
Yes.
And just this year, we have the word Brexit, right? It's a blended word that means something that never happened before, right?
Yes, yeah. And also, okay, we also find some change, some syntactical change. Like since you are English major, I bet some of you read Shakespeare, right? And then during his time, okay, and they will use like, for example, negative differently, okay, than modern English.
Right. The way that it's structured, the sentence structure is different now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And
Finally,
one last thing,
yes.
this is also very important. Okay, historical linguistics here. We try to reconstruct language and try to see the relationship between languages. In other words, okay, we group language, basically in two ways. One is genetically, the other is typologically. Okay, and then we use some data, some corpus, and to construct the so-called language family. So, like, do you know Andrew, German and English?
They are in the same family. They are cousins.
Yeah, actually, they are closely related.
Yes.
Yeah, they belong to the so-called Indo-European language.
Right.
However, okay, some of the language they still, they are relatives, but then they are more distant.
For instance, French and
related.
Italian they are more distant.
Yeah. Okay.
Than German and English.
Yes.
And so if you can reconstruct languages, you can basically reconstruct history, the history of human development. We can see how language changed and split, how they split into families. It's like reconstructing a family tree.
Yeah, and then in typological definition there, okay, we actually look at language in another different way. For instance, like we look at the word order. Even some language they come from different language family, but then they have the same syntactical order.
Yes.
So like SVO, something like that.
For instance, Japanese is very different from Chinese, right? Although we are close in terms of geography.
But then be aware that geography, we are close, right? But then actually we Chinese and the Japanese belong to different language
We have
family.
different language families, exactly. And the word order in Japanese, I'm
Very
sure
different.
is very, very different. Yes. So although we are close, we're actually different families, right? So that's the end of our overview, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so
and then let's look forward to whatever we are going to study in this semester.
Yeah, so we're going to start from morphology. And I hope you have a good time. Bye.